If you're a real estate investor, you absolutely have to have access to the MLS. I would compare it to almost like investing in stocks without reading the newspaper. You're gonna miss out on things and it's gonna cost you a fortune. Let me prove it to you. Let's dive right in. For today's example, I'm going to actually be utilizing my childhood home. We're going to dive into my computer and I'm going to show you both MLS data as well as PropStream and where there's some serious discrepancies. Now, before we do that, just real quickly, let's talk about how to get MLS access. First step is just to get your real estate license. I believe there's tons of perks and benefits. I've personally been licensed since 2016 in my main market, Indianapolis, and I've pretty much always partnered with somebody who has MLS access or who is a real estate agent in markets where I'm not licensed. In fact, one of the only projects I ever lost money on was a property I bought in a market I didn't have MLS access, utilizing tools that were not the MLS. So maybe that's why I'm so passionate about this. The second way to get MLS access if you're not licensed is to ask your real estate agent if they can set you up as their unlicensed assistant. Now, often this is free or a relatively low cost thing for them to do. They provide your information to the MLS and their managing broker, who either approves or denies your ability to effectively run your own comps. This can be super beneficial for both of you, particularly if you're doing some volume. That way they're not constantly having to run comps for you. It also makes it that you can hop in and look at stuff yourself versus waiting for somebody else to get it back to you or hoping that they interpret it correctly. I recently asked an agent to pull comps for me and she sent me what was listed. Like, I don't want to know what's active. I can see that on Zillow. I need to know what stuff has sold for and when. The third thing you can do that's probably the most frowned upon is you just ask a friend of yours who's licensed if they'll share their login and password. Now, this isn't something I would recommend doing, nor is it something that I would just like walk up to a random agent at a RIA and be like, yo, can I get your username and password? That being said, if they're listing a lot of your places or you're sending them a lot of referrals, who am I to judge? So hopping into my computer here, the property that we're going to be looking at is 839 Ridgetop Drive, St. Charles, Missouri, 63304. Throw that in there, pull up the details, and in particular, go over to the comps section. Why are you being bad? This is actually the second time I shot this video. The first time I shot this video, I realized that I didn't screen record anything. So second time's the charm. So here is PropStream's default comps view, which we'll get to in a second. In the MLS, we're going to go over here, uncheck these statuses, mark it as closed, and punch in the property that we're wanting to run comps on and hit results down here. Now, one thing that's interesting right off the bat, we can see that there are 6 examples. If I go over into PropStream, there's quite a bit more than that. So PropStream's default distance they do is going to be half a mile. So we're going to want to pull that in a bit. We want stuff that's sold as close to this property as possible. One other thing it's worth pointing out is that they state that any public sale data is simply an estimate because it is a non-disclosure state. If you're not familiar with non-disclosure states, there are 12 of them in the US that are, and it is even more of a reason why you want MLS access. In non-disclosure states, the laws dictate that individuals don't have to report to public records what their property sold for. Makes it kind of hard to pull comps. Another big reason we want MLS access is in non-disclosure states, if the property went through the MLS, those local MLS have guidelines that require the real estate agents to input the sales price data within 48 hours of that transaction closing. What it actually traded for, not an estimate. So we've got PropStream pulled in here to a quarter mile. And for just a quick second, let's look at just their MLS data. Now, this presents quite a problem to us. So they're only showing 3 records, whereas if I'm in the MLS, I have 6. Means if I'm using PropStream, I only have half of the data, and the data isn't necessarily accurate either. So if we hop back over here into PropStream, they've got that this property here on Weatherstone Drive sold for $486,000. Now that caught my eye because I grew up in this neighborhood and I'm not paying 500K for a house in this neighborhood. So if I go back to the MLS and I look at that same address where the real estate agent is required to input accurate data, it only sold for 385K. So the reality and PropStream's data are off by $100,000 on this one example. Now, another thing we want to just look at real quick, I never go off the estimated value on any tool. It's a good gut check for, hey, am I anywhere near spitting distance here? But as we can see, they've got the average sales price data at 427 versus the estimate at 397. I mean, effectively, we're looking at a $30,000 swing in value, and some of that's based on bad data. So if we look at that one real quick, in particular, I'm going to hop back over here, and I'm going to show you another perk of having MLS access. We can see agent-to-agent remarks. The seller was motivated, bring an offer to the co-listing agent, right? That's good to know if I'm running comps of, was this a typical sale or was it they were fire selling it because they had some other obligation that they had to meet? One other thing I want to just show you guys real quickly that I saw when poking around in this, if I go to both, there's an outlier in here. So another problem with this data, if we look at what they have on the public record side, they've got that this property here sold at $146,000, 300 bucks. That feels really low to me. If I go back to my MLS comps, I can see that that property, the one at 5879, actually sold for 345,000 bucks. That's a problem. Furthermore, I saw this other one that it says sold for 66,000 bucks. Now, I grew up in this neighborhood. Even a trashed out foreclosure is not going to sell for 66K. If I go and look at the Zillow's estimate on this, it's 391. So if I scroll down, I can even see that the last time this place was listed back in 2020, it was pinned at 290. There's no way it sold for 66K. So while with tools like PropStream and Deal Machine that don't have MLS access, they might get close. We might want to take that with a grain of salt. But the problem is we have no way to verify if that grain of salt is even accurate or not. I'm going to show you guys one other tool that comes with most MLSs in the country that I really like, and that is Realist. Realist has really solid just owner information, comparable data, market trends. They have two things that I think are really neat. So they have their sell score based off of a whole bunch of data points, whether they think it's likely to sell or not. Obviously, it doesn't guarantee anything, but just kind of a nice little gut check. And then I'm also a fan of their kind of real AVM. This particular property, if I look at it, I think realistically, I'm probably selling somewhere in the 410, 415, 405 range. They've got the Realist range of like 393. Again, it's kind of like using PropStream's estimate or Deal Machines or Zillow's. It's a nice like gut check, but I wouldn't just go and like, oh, I got to price this place at 393. That wouldn't make any sense. When it comes time to showing comps, their comparable tool is super cool. I like that it kind of just gives you this spit out here. Now, personally, I'm running comps. I'm going to cut this guy out because I know for a fact it's in a totally different neighborhood. But I can see I've got kind of this range of 360 to 440. Now, me personally, I tend to kind of always go for about the average. If I get the high price, great, but I don't have to sell for that in order to turn a profit. Now, one other problem with relying on something like PropStream or Deal Machine is we don't actually have photos on these particular places. Whereas in the MLS or in Realist, we've got photos for pretty much all of them. Do you think it might be important to be able to look at pictures of what you're using as comps to understand how your property measures up? I would argue mildly so. Now, just a couple last things that I really like with Realist outside of the comps tool. We've got their market trends, which is cool. We can see exactly what's going on in that zip code, which really might show us like, hey, are properties selling quickly? What's days on market look like? What's the average price for square foot, right? One thing I like to look at, the average days on market, is like, hey, if I'm below that, I'm really not worried, even if I haven't gone under contract yet. Something else that I personally like, they have the neighbors tool. I like to see who's around the property when they bought. Are they owner occupied, absentee, are they LLCs, that kind of info. And then lastly, they have this neighborhood profile, which is kind of cool. You can see actual demographics of who's in that zip code, marital status, male, female, age, education, even things like how often people are moving in or out, what percent's owner occupied versus rental, just kind of some helpful data points to try to understand who's your buyer going to be on this project. That way you can make sure you cater to who that's actually going to sell to. For instance, most properties in this area are owner occupied, so I probably don't want to do a rental grade remodel. Definitely not if I'm trying to sell for the average or above that. Having MLS access helps you to make accurate, informed decisions, especially when we're risking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Also gives you the ability to network with other agents, to be taken more seriously, and even list your own stuff if you want to put a little extra cash in your pocket. Thank you guys for watching today's video. Again, my name is Ryan Dossey. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. Hopefully you found this video informative or even a bit alarming if you've been flying blind without MLS access. I'll talk to you guys next time.